The things I'm going to talk about in this video helped me go from being socially anxious in high school to now putting myself out there on the internet consistently, to doing stand up. One time I performed in front of like 200 people, to like being able to like approach people without any major hesitancy. Obviously, sometimes you still feel like a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm able to do it despite that. I say all this not to say that like I'm special or anything like that. I just did the things that I'm going to say in this video, and it helped me go from point A to point B. And because of these things that I implemented, everything in my life improved. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it definitely got better than where it was. Imagine you like go to the grocery store and you're able to talk to the people around you, and your day is just slightly better because of that. And when you go home, you just have a little bit more energy because you were able to just learn something about the people around you. Or maybe like there was someone you were attracted to and you had the guts to go up to them and just start a conversation. Imagine how your life would like kind of change if you went from initially not being able to do that to now being able to do that. When it comes to lifestyle factors, relationships are the number one predictor of life expectancy, is the quality of your relationships. So if you're able to just talk to the people around you and actually have a better chance of connecting with people, like it'll just improve every area of your life. I see this comment on a lot of people's posts when they talk about social anxiety, and people comment like, oh, you never had social anxiety, because they see them after they've already overcome it. But I can promise you that I did at one point have social anxiety, to the point where I would literally like a girl. She would like me back. And then if just one of my friends were like, oh, she's not that cute, I would just be like, oh yeah, you know what? Nah, she's not cute. Even though I did like her. Like, you gotta be pretty socially anxious to lie to yourself like that. I was really nervous when it came to like presentations. I wouldn't really like speak up for myself. So I'll tell you the things that helped me overcome that. One thing I want you to know is that there's nothing inherently wrong with you. It's not like this is like part of your personality. Of course, there's introversion and extroversion, but when you feel like you can't do something because you feel uncomfortable in social situations, then that's social anxiety, and that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It's just we got to change our habits to align more with the goals and the type of person that we want to be. I think it's literally just like doing the work that'll help people overcome their social anxiety. And what I can do is just share the information that's helped me and has also helped a bunch of other people, because this is coming from like books and podcasts that I've listened to, as well as some of my own ideas, and hope that it can help you. It's not going to be perfect, but I'll just tell you everything that helps me, and then just see what works for you. Just know this: there's a lot of people that have faced social anxiety that you probably wouldn't think of. Like even Mahatma Gandhi, who literally led like a global movement, he used to deal with social anxiety. Okay, so why should you care in the first place? There was actually a time in my life where like I deep down I knew I had social anxiety, and I was just like, who cares? Okay, fine. And I know I have this, but like, does it really matter that much if like I just don't really want to speak to people? And I'm here to tell you that like it does matter a lot, because one, it can affect your health. A lot of people have equated loneliness to like smoking cigarettes. Like it has an actual negative effect on your physical health. And two, you got to think about like how it impacts the people around you, because if you're not showing up as like who you truly want to be, then like there's a part of you that's missing from the group of people around you. You have to think of yourself as like someone who has something of value to bring to the people around you. If you are your best version of yourself, then the people who like care about you, like they get to enjoy that version of you. And if you feel like you have something holding you back, then I think it's something worth addressing. Because one, loneliness, it impacts your health. Some people equate loneliness to smoking. People who are lonely have a higher risk of heart disease, Alzheimer's, other chronic conditions that could even like shorten your lifespan. So it is important to address. Even if you feel like, oh, I'm fine now, I just have some social anxiety, it's still worth addressing. And obviously, it's not just your physical health, it's your mental health too. Like your relationships with your family, your friends, all of that stuff improves if you just are able to address this like social anxiety, improve your social skills. Because imagine how your relationships would be if you just showed up as like the best, most authentic version of yourself. That would ultimately improve your friendships, your relationship with your family, your ability to talk to the people around you, like just strangers you meet. First, we're going to talk about what doesn't work. What doesn't work is this idea of just being yourself and that advice alone. When people just give that advice, just be yourself, they don't really define what that means, because it could be good advice if it's explained properly. Because if you have social anxiety, if I tell you, hey, just be yourself, that means like don't try anything new, right? That means just like just be the same person you are right now. But what you actually should do is try and be the best version of yourself. So it's still yourself, right? It's still authentic to you. It's still your values. It's not like you're trying to mimic someone else. But you're trying to improve on what your current situation is. It's not like just be who you are right now. It's be who you want to be while incorporating your values of who you are right now. Okay, so to address social anxiety, first we have to understand what it is. It is the fear of being scrutinized, judged, or found lacking that gets in the way of doing things that you want or need to do. So the key thing with this definition is it's holding you back from doing things that you want or need to do. I think everyone has like some level of social anxiety, even if it's just a little bit. Even like celebrities and whatever, I think they do have at least a little bit of social anxiety because no one's perfect. No one acts perfectly in every social situation. So to the extent that they feel uncomfortable or like are lacking or holds them back in even just like a little bit of ways, that's still some level of social anxiety. So that's one thing to understand is like everyone has some level of it. We just need to decrease where you're at. The way I think of social anxiety, it seems like there's like 3 levels, right? There's minor, medium, and major. Minor is like maybe you feel awkward in some moments. Like maybe the waiter comes through, gives you your food, and they say, enjoy your meal. And you say, you too, and you feel like socially anxious and you overthink that. Like that's like minor social anxiety. And I think to a certain extent, everyone feels some level of minor social anxiety. Medium level social anxiety, I think of this kind of like people pleasing. It's like when you don't say things that you know to be true, even though you know it's correct. Like let's say you're in class and the teacher's doing a problem on the board and you know the answer to the problem. For the sake of this example, let's say it's 2 plus 2 equals what? And you know the answer's 4, like you know that, right? But you don't want to raise your hand because then it brings attention to you and you might like dumb on the off chance that it's wrong, even though you do know it's right. So I think that's like medium level of social anxiety. It's like when you know something to be true, but you don't really say it. And then the third level is major social anxiety. And I think of this as like when the fear of being scrutinized impacts like multiple major areas of your life, like who you want to be in a relationship with, your career. If you're avoiding going to places because you think that like large crowds will be there and you'll feel uncomfortable. I think of this as like major social anxieties when it's really impacting a lot of areas of your life. And there were portions of my life where I definitely fit in that third category. But now I feel like I've pretty much overcome it. And sometimes I feel like minor levels of it, but again, it doesn't hold me back. So now that we understand what social anxiety is, one thing I want to mention is that a lot of people confuse introversion and social anxiety. Like they think that they're introverts when they may just be socially anxious. I say this because I think I fell in that category to an extent. Like more and more, I'm realizing that between introvert and extrovert, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. So introversion versus extroversion is like where you get your energy from. Like if you feel more energetic after a day at home, then you're probably an introvert. But if you feel more energetic after like hanging out with a bunch of people, then you're probably extroverted. But both introverts and extroverts should be able to be comfortable in social situations. Like even if you're an introvert, you should be able to public speak. Like if you had to go and present in front of 25 people and you feel like you couldn't do it, that's not introversion. That's social anxiety because it's holding you back from doing something that you want or need to do. So if it holds you back, it's social anxiety. If it has to do with you just being a little tired, then it's introversion. And when it comes to introversion versus extroversion, one good way to determine if you think you are an introvert or an extrovert is like, how were you as a kid? Were you like super social? Were you talking to like so many kids around you? Or were you keeping a little more to yourself? Because when you're a kid, there's less societal things that have impacted you, right? So it's more true to who you are. Maybe you're like, oh, actually, I was a lot more social when I was a kid. Maybe I'm extroverted. This is something that I've thought about recently, so I thought I'd share. Okay, so how do we overcome this? First and foremost, you have to cut off toxic friends. And I know this is probably not what you're expecting. It's a video about social anxiety. You thought I was just going to give you some social tips, like some things to just say in every situation. No, the most important thing is cutting off toxic people from your life. Because if they don't support you, they don't support who you want to be, they don't support you trying to improve your social skills, overcome your social anxiety, how could you be able to do that without that support system? Because if the people around you are not supporting you, in fact, they're holding you back from who you want to be, they don't support you, becoming the best version of yourself. If they don't support that and they're in fact holding you back from doing that, how could you improve? How could you improve? How could you be the person you want to be if literally people are holding you back? Like if you were running a race, you're literally sprinting as fast as you can, and people are holding your shirt back. Do you think you'll be able to run that far? No, right? So it's like you won't be able to make good progress if you have people in like your close circle who are not rooting for you or worse, rooting against you. And I say this from personal experience. Like when I had social anxiety, like some of my friends would tell other people, they'd be like, oh yeah, Prav doesn't really talk. They would say this about me. It's like, that's not a helpful thing to say about someone who has social anxiety at all. You know what I mean? If anything, I couldn't believe I was friends with these people. Yeah, whatever, we grew up together. But like, if someone's truly your friend, they'll help you try and get better and improve your life. And I know this is going to be like super uncomfortable to like cut off people in your life who you feel like are not really supporting you or even actively trying to hold you back. But I do think it's an extremely important step in the process of becoming who you want to be. And secondly, with social anxiety, you have to understand that the magic that you are looking for is in the work that you are avoiding. This is a quote that's been on like social media. It was on the Modern Wisdom podcast. The magic that you're looking for is in the work that you've been avoiding. So you have to think to yourself, like, what kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to be the person who's like literally just standing in the corner, who's like scared to approach someone? Or do you want to be the person who's like comfortable just walking up to anyone, introducing yourself, having a good conversation? Because you get to choose who you want to be through your actions. I'm not saying like never to stay home and like have chill nights. Yeah, of course, like if that's what you like to do that. What I'm saying is we want to get to a point where like this doesn't hold anyone back. Like social anxiety doesn't hold anyone back from like being who they truly want to be, being authentic to themselves. And how you get to that point is you do the work that you've been avoiding. So then you got to think about like, okay, what's the work that I've been avoiding? Maybe I want to approach someone and I felt uncomfortable, so I didn't want to do that. Or maybe it's posting videos on the internet because I felt like, oh, people might judge if I post something, but even though truly I wanted to do it. If we want to address social anxiety, first we have to understand how people deal with it. And the main way people deal with it is avoidance. Avoidance is it's turning away from what makes you anxious. A lot of people with social anxiety, how they think is like, all right, if I just avoid the situation, then I don't have to face that uncomfortable feeling and I'll feel better right now. And I used to think like this too. It's like, oh, you avoid going to the party or the work event because you're like, oh, I won't have to confront this uncomfortable situation and I'll just be more comfortable like chilling at home. But that's based on an assumption that avoidance will lead to comfort, right? If I avoid the party, then I'll feel comfortable at home, which may be true in the short term, but in the long run, you'll feel more uncomfortable because deep down you'll know that you avoided this situation. So in your head, like the problem gets bigger and you may feel smaller because you've avoided something. Because more and more what I've learned is like each action that we do kind of defines our confidence in that area, right? So if you want to be a confident person in terms of like social situations, avoiding social situations will make yourself believe that you're less comfortable in those situations. Because I think confidence comes from proof. Like if you confronted a bunch of uncomfortable feelings and you're able to like start to talk to people, then in your head you'll be like, oh, I've already done this. Like I know I can do it. But by avoiding a lot of these things, then your mind's like, oh, we avoided this last time. We should avoid it this time again because we weren't able to face it the last time. So I think that confidence comes from proof. Another reason that a lot of people default to avoidance, my previous self included, is we think of the worst case scenario because there is a possibility that happens. Like let's say you go and introduce yourself to someone. There is a chance of them like straight up ignoring you or like getting mad at you for just approaching them. There is a small chance of that. So a lot of people default to avoidance because they're like, okay, if there's a chance of that happening, I can pretty much make that chance zero by like not approaching this person. And it's important to understand why our minds do this. Our minds do this because we're built for survival, because for all of history, we were just trying to not die. So like our minds are wired to think of like the worst case scenarios. Throughout history, maybe it was like, oh shoot, if I do this, maybe there'll be a tiger that eats me. So right now in like social situations, you have the same mind that's literally like, oh, I shouldn't do this because a tiger might eat me. Our bodies are reacting almost in a similar way, but now it's just like having a tough conversation with my boss. It's like little things like that our mind is just blowing out of proportion. Okay, so how do we overcome this? Well, the first step is to notice it. We have to notice when we're feeling anxious or our mind is driving us to more of a comfortable situation than a situation that'll result in growth. And to notice these thoughts, they usually start with two words, like what if, right? Like, oh, what if this person doesn't like me? Something like that may hold you back from approaching someone or, maybe participating in like a public speaking event or doing stand-up comedy or making videos on the internet. It'll usually start with what if, right? So that's one way to identify it. And over time, like you'll get better and better. Don't beat yourself up if you like feel like, oh, I should have identified this thought earlier and you realize after. Like, don't beat yourself up. Over time, you'll get better at this. Remember that the things that I'm talking about, like this is like for the rest of our lives. We want to improve our social skills forever. It's not just to, feel better after having a little bit of social anxiety. We just want to be like better socially because it's just going to improve our lives literally forever. So when you get these what if thoughts, I want you to ask yourself, is it truthful? Is it helpful? It's like, one, is it true? Like, what are the chances that this situation will happen when you get this what if thought? And then two, like, is it helpful to have this thought, or is it holding you back from doing something that you really want to do that you know there's a low risk that it'll turn out bad? So when it comes to these thoughts, again, is it truthful? Is it helpful? And if the answer to both of those is yes, then it's a valid thought. But if it's not truthful or helpful, then you know not to follow that thought. Try not to let that thought determine your actions. And of course, sometimes you'll make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up over making a mistake and like sometimes following an anxious thought. But just generally over time, we want to make progress in this area. And then eventually, like you'll look back like 6 months, a year from now, and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, I actually improved like a ton from where I was. So once you identify the thought, then you just don't follow it. Even though you'll feel uncomfortable and your mind will be lying to you and telling you like, oh, maybe the worst case scenario will happen, you just do the action anyway. So in this case, like let's say it's approaching someone to talk to them. You just do it anyway, even though you feel uncomfortable. And then over time, you get less and less of those thoughts, less and less of those feelings, and you feel even more confident in these situations. So it's like we're getting a little bit more short-term anxiety because you have to face something uncomfortable, right? But because of that, we're lowering our long-term anxiety because deep down we'll be able to face this in more situations in the future. So it's really balancing the short term versus the long term. When you avoid things, you're prioritizing the short term. When you confront things, you're prioritizing the long term. So we want to prioritize the long term. Okay, progress over perfectionism. A lot of times when people they try and overcome their anxiety, they get into this perfectionist mindset and then they avoid things if it's not perfect. But again, like the more avoidance you partake in, the bigger the problem gets. And we'll never be perfect. Like whatever social situation you have in your mind that you want to address, like maybe it's approaching a girl, maybe it's just like talking to a friend. You're never going to have like 100% always be perfect in every social situation. That doesn't exist. We just want to make progress because over time we'll just get better and better. And eventually you'll be pretty good at this stuff, if not great at it. But again, don't focus on perfectionism. Focus on progress. Like think about where you are right now and be really honest with yourself. Like where are you right now in terms of like your social anxiety, your social skills, the things that you want to improve on. And then just try and make a little progress each time. And what's helped me in this area is like really noticing what makes me uncomfortable. Because so many of the good things that have happened to me in my life have first started with me feeling uncomfortable confronting it. Whether it's like posting content on the internet, moving across the country from New Jersey to Los Angeles, performing in front of like 200 people doing stand-up, all of these things that they made me feel like uncomfortable at first. But I realized that like that's also where all the growth is. The magic in your life is in the work that you've been avoiding. Because why are you avoiding it? You know, it's probably because it's true to you. It's probably because it's something you really want to do. It's probably like something that's like part of your soul. It's just you don't want to be judged on it. You know what I mean? This is how I felt. It was like I've always wanted to make content. I've always wanted to like express myself in some ways. I had this like deep yearning for it, but I wouldn't do it because I was afraid that people would judge it. And if they judged it, then they're actually judging me. It took a lot of self-reflection to get this. Like, this was mostly just feelings, but now I've thought about it a lot. But it's like, if you're avoiding something and you shouldn't be afraid of it, it might be because it's really true to you. It's something that's authentic, and you may be afraid that people would judge your authentic self. Because if you're wearing a mask, right? Like let's say I showed up and I was wearing like a Scream mask. If you've seen the movie Scream, it's like a ghost mask, right? And you started making fun of my mask. Well, then I could just take it off, you know? But if you started just making fun of my face, then maybe that would hurt me because it's actually me, right? The mask is just something that I'm wearing. But if it's actually something that is true to you, then it may hurt when people judge it. But the alternative of not doing that, the alternative of like wearing the mask all the time, it means that you don't get to be your authentic self. And that's a shame, man. Because it's worth showing to the world. It's worth like being yourself because who else is going to do it, you know? There's only one of you, so who else is going to do it? A little bit of a sidebar, but one thing I want to reiterate is that a lot of social anxiety comes from our assumptions. Let me know if you felt this way. Maybe you send a text to someone you're attracted to, and then you wait, and they don't text you back for like a day, and you're like, oh no, what if they don't like me? Like, what if they hate me? All these things, and then you get a text, and you're like, oh, you realize like, oh, they were probably just busy throughout the day. These are your assumptions. This is like social anxiety. It's not something that you know to be true. It's kind of like a conspiracy theory against yourself. I think this was a tweet I saw. Same thing with social anxiety. It's just social situations that prompt it. Be very mindful of your assumptions. Like, so constantly asking yourself, is it truthful? Is it helpful? Is very important, because if it's not truthful, it's probably just an assumption. And we don't want to build our lives around inaccurate assumptions. A lot of times, like, social anxiety, like, it comes down to this mindset that it's about concealing our flaws. I'll use a personal example, stand-up comedy, right? I wanted to do it, but I have this little bit of a social anxiety because, everyone's going to be looking at me, and what if I'm actually not funny? And what if it'll be revealed to everyone? I think this is what was holding me back. This is one thing that was holding me back. This is just an example, but like, it could be a lot of other things. It could be like a physical insecurity that you don't want revealed in front of people, or maybe it's like how you speak. But the truth is, like, everyone has those things. And the more you're able to confront it, the less power those thoughts have over you. Ultimately, social anxiety, a lot of times it comes down to how we feel about ourselves. We're worried about what other people will think instead of what we think of ourselves. Like, for me, I cared so much what people thought of me that I didn't have this grounding. But if you really know who you are and you feel like what you have to say is like valuable to the world and the people around you, your social anxiety will decrease, because then it's just being yourself in front of other people. Yeah, other people are going to see it, maybe they'll judge, but if you have true confidence in who you are, then you're okay with it. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about like how to build that true confidence in who you are. And I think the way to do it is, one, to define who you actually want to be. Like, really think about it. Really think, who do I want to be? And I would write it down on a piece of paper, take characteristics that you admire from other people, put them all together, and include some of the things that you admire about yourself already, put it all together, and then have like an ideal version of yourself. Have an idea of like who you truly want to be. And then prove it to yourself with your actions that you can become that person. And you're never going to be 100% that person. Like, no one ever 100% reaches their ideal. Maybe like religious figures like Jesus and the Buddha, maybe like them, sure. But for us, like human beings, no one becomes their ideal. But we just want to make progress towards that. But if you know who you truly want to be and you prove it to yourself in your actions, even when you feel uncomfortable, that's how you gain confidence in knowing who you are. And if you're confident in knowing who you are, then you'll be okay being judged by some people, which means your social anxiety won't hold you back. That's really the key to overcoming social anxiety. When you make those better decisions, you need some sort of North Star. So I really think it's important to define who you want to be. Because what do you value? Different people value different things. Like for me, like I've talked about it a bunch, I love comedy. I love storytelling. I like putting myself out there. I like expressing. I like new ideas. So all of these things are important in who I want to be. So that's why I'm making these videos too. It's like, this is aligned with who I want to be. Like, I want to share the things that I've learned. So by making this video, I'm gaining a little bit of confidence in that I'm getting closer to who I want to be. But you have to do that for yourself. Like, what do I really value in the people I admire? Because it's going to be different for everyone. And again, then you prove it to yourself with your actions. Like, you probably have some beliefs in yourself that aren't true. For example, you might think, oh, I'm bad at asking someone out. Let's just use this as an example. Maybe you think this, maybe you don't. Let's say you think, I'm bad at asking people out. Well, if you ask out 20 more people, then obviously you get better at asking people out. Then that thought you've consistently had that like, oh, I'm bad at asking people out, it no longer becomes true. So I'm using this example to say, like, you prove it to yourself by your actions. Because if you've repeatedly confronted that uncomfortable feeling, that the idea of you being like bad at something, then you'll no longer believe it because you have proof. You get over this social anxiety with proof. And of course, it's going to be uncomfortable and awkward at first, but like over time, it gets less and less uncomfortable and awkward, and you learn more things, and it's worth going through that uncomfortable, awkward phase in order to get better at whatever it is you want to do. Okay, so I'll talk about some more strategies. One thing that's really important is to have structure, like questions to fall back on when it comes to small talk. So in this book, How to Be Yourself and Overcome Social Anxiety, they mentioned this study that was done about two groups of people. One group had good social skills. They didn't have any social anxiety. We'll call them Group A. And the second group was Group B. Group B did have social anxiety. At first, they just observed how they interacted with each other. So for Group A, like things went relatively well and everyone was like social and like talking, like getting to know each other, right? And then Group B that had social anxiety, it was kind of awkward, right? There was a lot of silence and it just wasn't going nearly as well as Group A. Then they were thinking like, okay, like how do we make Group B more like Group A? So then they gave them like a structure. They were like, okay, talk about like these specific questions. Maybe it was like talk about weather, sports, and movies. And now when they observed both groups, they had like the same level of social skills pretty much. So group B, the group with like social anxiety, all they had to do was say, hey, talk about these three topics. And all of a sudden they felt like super comfortable in the room. So if you have social anxiety, one thing that's really important is just have some small talk questions to fall back on. And if you don't know any, literally just like ask ChatGPT, or I can give you some too. One question that this girl asked me that was pretty good was like, if you could have a mansion, a townhouse, and an apartment in 3 different places in the world, where would they be? And it's an interesting question because then you probably get to learn like where they're from, because chances are they'll pick one house close to their family, right? Where they want to go on vacation, and then like also like what their ideal home and location would be. So it's like it's a pretty interesting question to learn a lot about someone. And another one is if you had a free day, completely free, you don't have to do any chores, no cooking, none of that, what would you spend your time doing? This is another way to get to learn like someone's values. So these are just like some good conversation starter questions. And always have those in the back of your pocket. Not literally, don't like pull out note cards or whatever, but always like have this in the back of your mind. To have like some sort of questions to fall back on in conversations. Because again, structure helps you overcome social anxiety. The next thing you got to do is set specific goals and focus on progress. So it might be specific like, okay, today I'm going to start a conversation with the cashier. So I've had this goal before. It's literally just like try and get to know the cashier at the next coffee shop. So pretty much a good rule of thumb is like, whenever someone asks you for your name, let's say like you're ordering food or at a coffee shop, just ask for their name too. Just be like, oh, what's your name? Sometimes like literally their face will light up and they've like given me extra food and stuff just because I was like, oh, like, what's your name? And like they're smiling at me and like my day just becomes like a little bit better. And other times they'll just say their name. But anyway, the point is like set these specific goals and just focus on getting a little bit better on like every day that you can do this. Obviously there'll be some days where you don't do it, but if you just consistently focus on making progress and you try and face that uncomfortable feeling, you'll be amazed with how much growth you can have. So set these specific goals. Maybe it's talking to the cashier at the coffee shop. Maybe it's approaching someone at the bar. Could be anything, right? As long as it's making you a little bit uncomfortable and you feel like you're making progress, that's a good goal to have. Okay, here are some additional mindsets that I think are beneficial to overcoming social anxiety. Number one is that improving your social skills is not a temporary thing. Like that we're going to be doing this for the rest of our lives because we just want to be able to like impact the people around us positively. A lot of people, I think that when they think of like anxiety, they're like, okay, I need to like get over it. It's like they're climbing a hill and then they'll get to the top. No, the whole thing is like we want to consistently get out of our comfort zone and grow throughout our whole lives, because I think that's how you live a fulfilling life. And that's what's helped me in like so many areas of my life. And I still feel like I could do a lot more. But I know that like that is like the pathway to a meaningful life, is just putting yourself in situations where you can grow. Another mindset that's important for social anxiety is how you feel is not necessarily how you look. Like there will be situations where you'll feel really nervous. You'll be thinking like, oh, everyone can tell I'm nervous. Maybe some people could tell that you're nervous if it's like really extreme. But generally speaking, like they can't see as much as what you feel. And I know this from doing stand-up comedy. Like the first time I did stand-up, I went on stage, it was open mic. There was only like 10, 12 people in the audience, but I was still really nervous, right? And I go on stage, I go through my set. I talked so fast that I only did 2.5 minutes out of like the 5. Obviously I was nervous, but like I talked to my friends after. I was like, oh, could you tell that I was nervous? And they were like, no, we couldn't really tell that you were nervous. I mean, obviously it was your first time, so we assumed that you'd be nervous, but like you didn't seem nervous. So it's like how you feel is not necessarily how you look. A lot of times we're like, oh, I must look like this. Just focus on your actions. Like prove to yourself who you want to be through your actions, not your feelings. Because of course you're going to feel uncomfortable. That's one indicator that what you're doing may lead to growth, is if you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So like don't focus too much on how you feel. Focus on your actual actions. So now I want to talk about some socially challenging activities that could really improve your confidence. So I think an absolute game changer is doing one of these things like public speaking, stand-up comedy, improv, maybe like an acting class, something like that. Something that you have to perform in front of other people. Because if you can get comfortable with a bunch of people judging you, then like other social situations become a little bit easier. Because you could compare it. You can be like, oh, actually, I literally just performed in front of 20 people. And even though it didn't go perfectly, everyone was still like pretty chill and like treated me normally. So like that means that I can like approach this person. You know, this is a lot easier than performing. It gives you like an anchor point. So I do think that like doing these things is a good way to help you overcome some social anxiety or just improve your social skills in general. The next thing I want to talk about is the 1% rule. So I've mentioned this a bunch. If we just focus on progress instead of perfectionism, over time you can get a lot better. And one thing I want to say is like the math checks out on this. If you get 1% better every day in a year, you become 37 times better. Not 37%, 3,700%. So if you actually do that, you actually focus on getting better, by the end of the year, you'll be like unrecognizable from when you started. And when you're using the 1% rule, just focus on like one habit for maybe like 2 weeks at a time. So I'll list like a bunch of social habits that are really good to implement. The first would be just smiling. I feel like this is something that I could work on. I don't smile that much in my videos or when I'm talking to people. 2, saying someone's name when you speak to them. So like you ask them their name. Obviously, don't say it every single sentence. Like, Steve, nice to meet you, Steve. Where are you from, Steve? Like, just a couple times you say it, right? That's just good social skills. 3, actually listening. So a lot of times when you're talking to someone, like they're just trying to think of like what they're going to say next. But if you're actually listening, you'll ask good follow-up questions. You'll actually be more attentive as to what they're saying. But it is something that people have to practice, because most conversations are not really that deep. But if you ask good questions, you can really get to someone's values. And they'll really appreciate you because of that. The fourth important skill is not using the word but instead using the word and. A lot of times when you use the word but, you kind of like dismiss what someone else is saying. So if you say something like, I understand where you're coming from, but I think we should do it this way, then they might just think that you're like completely dismissing what they just said. If you change that to like, I understand where you're coming from, and I also have an idea of what we could do. Now it becomes more collaborative. So this is just like one small social tweak to make. Another important thing, asking open-ended questions, because then people really just like to talk about themselves. So if you ask good open-ended questions, like 1, they will like you more, and that's not necessarily the only reason we're doing this, but 2, you'll have better conversations. Okay, also making eye contact. A lot of times when people speak, they don't really make eye contact with the person they're speaking to. Like you should look someone in the eyes while you're talking to them because it builds trust with the person you're talking to. Some other good social skills is not to give orders. Don't ever try and take away someone's autonomy when you're talking to them in a conversation. Obviously, like me making content, it's different. I'm speaking to you like you're my younger self, so I'm just telling you what to do. But in the real conversation, like I wouldn't be telling you what to do. I would help you figure out for yourself what you wanted to do. Because people don't like to be given orders. Like, have you ever had a sibling literally just be like, hey, pick that up for me? And then you're like, no, I'm not going to do it. Well, you can't just like tell me what to do like that. It's like that Buja, what is this behavior video, if you've seen that. But people don't like to be told what to do. But if you ask them, then you're way less likely to like get into a confrontation, and it'll just be an easier conversation, right? Maybe the most important part of this is to make the other person feel important. Like whenever you're having a conversation with someone, really just value their input and what they have to say and like try and learn from them, and they'll appreciate you as well. So that's just like some basic social skills. A lot of these are from the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you haven't read that, I'd highly recommend it. And the other book that's really helped me in making this video is called How to Be Yourself. So if you look up those 2 books, those are the 2 that really helped me make this video. Another thing that does not work is following your gut. If you're dealing with like social anxiety right now, your gut is going to make you feel uncomfortable. So when people say like follow your gut, I don't think that's good advice for people with social anxiety because it'll influence you into going into more comfortable situations. When in reality, you need to follow your goals. So don't follow your gut all the time. Sometimes follow your goals. If you have social anxiety, one mindset that I'd like you to adopt is that this is something that you have. It's not who you truly are. This process of overcoming social anxiety or even just improving your social skills, it's a process of becoming the best version of yourself. Again, it's something that you have. If it's something that you have, then that means it's something that you can get rid of. Yes, it will take work. Yeah, it won't be easy. But if you make the right decisions, you take the right steps, and if you're able to face these uncomfortable situations, consistently get better, then like that person who you're supposed to be, you'll just become that person. And I really hope that for you. Okay, so I went through a lot here, so I just want to recap some things I've covered in this video. 1, you are not social anxiety. It's just something that you need to overcome. It's something that you have, so it's something that you can get rid of. And if you take the right steps, you can absolutely overcome it. 2, progress over perfectionism. Remember, this is never going to be perfect, but just focus on progress. 3, don't judge yourself by how you feel. Judge yourself by your actions. Remember, you will feel uncomfortable in this. That is one signal that you're doing something that leads to growth. So again, don't focus on how you feel, focus on your actions. 4, focus on getting 1% better every day in these social situations. 5, the magic that you're looking for is in the work that you've been avoiding. 6, create an ideal version of yourself and work towards it. I know I covered a lot. Take it one step at a time. And trust me, of course, you'll face some setbacks here or there, but if you consistently are putting yourself out there, facing uncomfortable situations, really making this a goal of yours and proving that to yourself by your actions, then you'll get closer and closer to the best version of yourself. And you'll look back and just see how much progress you've made. I really hope this helps. And listen, I'm not saying that any of this is going to be easy, but I am saying that it's going to be worth it. Life's not easy, but it's worth it. Take care.